So are your masters in the home studio not really turning out like you would have hoped? You're doing all the tricks you found on the internet, you're using all the same plugins, yet your master doesn't sound anything like the track you're trying to match it to. You pull in that track from your favorite album, you compare it to the track that you've just spent hours and hours recording, mixing, and then finally you're at the final stage. You're like, I'm ready to release this thing, but I need to get the final little touch on it to have it sound great, but it's just not getting there. I've been there before. I've recorded hundreds of tracks in my home studio. I've mastered professional tracks, and I know what it's like to put your mix up against the reference mix and just feel and hear the difference and how underwhelming it is despite all the tricks on the internet that you're trying to use, all the same plugins, and it's just not getting there. Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through every step, exactly what you need to do to get your track to sound exactly like the reference track you pull in. It's really not that difficult. I'll walk you through every step here and get your master sounding amazing in your home studio. Hi everyone, I'm Make the Music. I have a channel dedicated to helping you create amazing sounding tracks in your home studio. So you should like and subscribe to the video if you're interested in seeing more of that. But let's get into my DAW and I'll break down exactly how to get your master to match that reference you pulled in so you have an amazing track to release to the world. Okay, so I'm in my DAW right now. I'm going to break down how to get your track to sound exactly like your reference. So the first thing I would do is pull your mix in to a new fresh session. So I have my mix here of the song I've done called World Can Bring, and it's in a similar style of my reference. So the reference I'm going to be using is Run for Cover by The Killers. This will get a bit loud. I'll pull down the volume for you guys, but this is not the commercial volume of it actually. And then my track sounds like this. So a very similar style, that indie rock flavor. Now, at full volume, Run for Cover sounds like this. Now, this is going to be mastered volume, so this is going to be a little louder, so just pay attention. Okay, so that sounds amazing, right? Then I pull in my mix, and it sounds weak and feeble, right? That's okay. We're going to get it there. Okay, we're going to get our master sounding exactly like this one. So first thing you want to do, pull both those tracks in, get your reference track in here. Next, what we want to do is trim off the edges of our track so we know when it starts, when it finishes. I want my track to start here. I want it to fade out for a little bit. I'm going to use a fade out right here. Great, that's gonna be the fade out for my track. So obviously when you pull in the reference track and compare it to your master, the first thing you're gonna notice is volume, of course. The master is going to be super loud. It's gonna have that high volume. So we definitely wanna get the volume of our track up. But what a lot of people miss is the first step, which is actually dialing in the EQ of your master in stereo width to get to sound like that reference track. Because if you don't have the EQ set correctly, you have some frequencies boosted too much, you have too much sub information, or if you have problems in the mix that you maybe need to go back and fix, then you're actually not gonna get it to commercial volume, and you're actually not gonna get your mix and your final master to sound like that commercial reference because it doesn't have all the prior steps dialed in correctly. So first thing I wanna do is bring down the volume of this mix. And then we're going to start adding some plugins. And I want to notice EQ-wise, what is the difference between this master and my master? Does it have more low mid information? Does it have more top end? I'm not exactly sure, so we're going to take a listen here. So here's Run for Cover. Let's just listen and hear to the EQ quality and character. Let's go to my track. Okay, so first thing I noticed is mine sounds actually pretty thin compared to the reference master. So I'm missing some low mid information. It might actually be a little brighter on the top end as well, but overall their track feels so much fuller and mine just feels like it's thin, like it's missing something. So the first thing I'm going to do, and there's advanced plugins that we can do to do this, which we'll bring in later, is I'm going to use a stock Reaper EQ and just A/B and see if I can make some EQ changes to help get this thing to sound closer to the commercial mix. So here's the Run for Cover. Okay, so I brought up some low mids, which seemed to be lacking in my track. It seemed too scoop. Okay, that is a lot better, right? So we added some EQ there. I added 2 dB at about 200 and 1.6 dB at about 700. I find a lot of mixes, amateur mixes and masters sound way too scooped, and so that's one of my go-to moves. So let's A/B again. Let's see if I can get the peak volumes a little closer here. Mine seems to be peaking at about -7. That's about -7. Of course, something more limited in slam is going to seem louder. Seems to be a little more low and sub information there in the Run for Cover one that I'm missing in my mix. So what I'm going to do is bring in Virtual Mix Rack by Slate. And what I'm going to do here is add a little bit of low sub information. It seems to be missing. My mix just seems to be thin overall. So let's remove all these elements here. I'm going to bring in the lift control. Let's bring in some big. Okay, so that is so much more closer. We've got the EQ dialed in first, which is a big one. We want to get that dialed in. So I'll A/B the changes I've made here. Now, it hasn't made my track sound boomy or muddy. It's just filled out the low end in a very desirable way. And now it sounds more like the reference master. Also, it seems like their master is a little wider. It's always a good idea, I think, to add a little stereo width. So pay attention to the stereo width that they have going on in their track. I'm going to add a little bit of width to mine. So all the changes so far. Okay, so EQ and width, I think we're dialed in. It's sounding great. Now we got to get that volume up, right? That's the next step. So I'm going to turn my speakers down. It's time to go into limiter land here. Now, plugin I absolutely love is the FGX2 by Slate. I think it's just an amazing mastering plugin. What we want to do is get this volume close to the level of the reference. Now, not exactly. This is an MP3 download, and so what actually happens is their track actually clips a little bit. I don't want my track to clip. I'm going to actually ceiling it out at about -1. So I'm going to bring their track down to about -1.5 because it clipped it by about that much when I brought it in, so I can do an accurate comparison. So that's the commercial volume I'm aiming for. I'm way below that, right? Now, the key is not matching peak volumes. Mastering is not about, okay, theirs is peaking at 0. I need my mix to peak at 0 and I'm good. That's not how this works. You're trying to get is actually average volume to match. So that would be LUFS is what's commonly used to measure average volume. RMS can also be used. I use that metric sometimes, but you do not want that peak volume to match, or you do want it to peak out at about -1, but you also want that average volume to match. So we're going to find out what the average volume is. And there's different ways of measuring that. That's why there's a difference between LUFS and RMS. I'm not going to get into that here. It's actually pretty complex. I'm going to put FGX2 on the reference, but not to change it, but to see where the loudness is. So I'm looking at LUFS here. And it looks like it's at about 4 LUFS, right? So I want my track to be pretty close to that. I don't know if I want it as slammed as theirs, but for the purpose of this video, because we're trying to match the master exactly, I'm going to intend to do that. So here's FGX2. Now we're going to add some gain. I'm going to make the ceiling about -0.3, and we're going to bring this track volume up. So just note, things are going to start to get loud, so maybe turn on your speakers or your headphones. So I can hear it start to get kind of crunchy there, or some digital noise coming in. So what is a great way to match the volume of a reference is use multiple limiters. Don't let one limiter do all the work. Let a couple different limiters do the work. So what I'm going to do here is use the L2 limiter before the FGX2, put it on mastering, and just give it a few dB of gain reduction before it goes into the FGX2 plugin. And every time I close my eyes, I see a new reality. Now we can more easily get that volume up. And every time I close my eyes, I see a new reality. The key with limiters really is bringing that threshold down, setting that output ceiling pretty high, and then leaving the release. I have it on auto release. That's a fairly slow release. You don't want a quick You want a fairly long release, or quick release, I should say, not a slow release, right? Because when the limiter's hitting those transients, we want it to let off the gas really quickly. We don't want to slam it like we're mixing a bass guitar or something like that. We want it to hit the transients and just let off the gas really quickly so we can get the volume up where we're not slamming it completely, where all the transients are gone. We still want our mix to feel punchy. Like this still feels very punchy to me. Like I still can hear the drums, they still sound good, but it's loud. It's loud. It's at the level that it needs to be. So let's A/B now again. Obviously, it's not going to be 100% the same, right? We're not going to get 100% the same because they're different tracks. But what I also noticed with their master is there was a little more just like top information. So I'm going to use this Fresh Air plugin to add a bit of that in. Because that's adding gain, I'm going to back off the limiter a little bit. You don't want to just look at meters too for the loudness situation. What also matters is your ears. Do they sound the same level? If they're sounding close to the same level, then you're there. But meters can help kind of guide that path. So obviously these are different mixes and different songs, but my track is now getting really, really close. And all we did was, we added 6 plugins, but they're all very subtle plugins here. Now we could have just tried to make this loud without the EQ changes, but to me, the master does not sound as good if I got rid of the EQ changes. The reference just sounds way more fuller, right? I add those EQ changes back in. Maybe I added too much cloudiness down here. Maybe it just needed more sub information. So now we're in a stage of fine tuning with the limiter, seeing how the limiter is reacting to the EQ changes before we finally are ready to have this done. Go to the verse parts here. So I feel like if these two tracks came up on a Spotify or YouTube music playlist, that they would sound comparable. I wouldn't be like shocked to hear one and then go to the next one and go, whoa, was there something wrong with this track? I wouldn't feel that. There might actually be too much top end in this one now, so I might dial this Fresh Air plugin back a bit. So to me, now I've gotten my master pretty freaking close. If you wanted to go one more step, you could, and use a plugin like Ozone Elements by iZotope. Throw that on there, put the reference in. I have a video about this. You can click it right there about using Ozone Elements for mastering, and then it'll do even more calibrating to that reference mix. But I feel like I've used these plugins here to get as far as I've needed to go, and I feel like that's really comparable and would sound great on the same playlist as this track. So let me A/B all the changes I've made. There's going to be some volume variation here between what I had as a master before and what it is now. I'll bring up the level though there so you can hear it. Okay, so here's what I started out with. And here's what it is now. And it sounds comparable to my reference. So there you go. That is my step-by-step process for matching any track when mastering. Start out, get that EQ dial in. Make sure you've got a similar EQ curve to that track so it feels as full or as bright. You don't have to match it to what I did in mine, but if your track that you're referencing, for example, is super crisp from the top end, add that top end in there. If there's a lot of bottom, add the low end in there. So you bring those references in, EQ, get the EQ figured out, get the stereo width figured out, add some stereo width to mine, and then dial the loudness in with a few limiters in a row and bring that volume up to whatever it was. It was -4 LUFS for the track I was referencing. Could be louder, could be quieter, and dial that in until you have the loudness at about same levels, both with your ears and what you're seeing with the meters. And you should have a track that's very comparable and mastered quite good. It's very simple in the home studio. I feel like there's a lot of bad information out there, but I hope that helped you. If that was very helpful for you, I have a home studio gear guide in the description down below, which gives you everything you need to start building out your home studio gear-wise and software-wise, so you can make great sounding music. So if you're interested in that, that's in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time.